the webinar today is going to look at three sort of main areas. We're going to look at Copilot in particular and in terms of data security. So what are those key steps you need to be taking around making sure that Copilot is ready for your organization, that your organization is ready for Copilot, sorry, the way around. Making sure that you are able to do what you need to do to protect sensitive information from being brought back by Copilot. They're going to have a little look at some of the other AI controls that are available within Purview in terms of what you can do to help mitigate and manage some of the risks that might be associated with using AI. And then right at the end, we'll have a little quick look at some of the new features that are either coming or have been added to the Purview suite for those who are familiar with things that might be going on, or use some areas of Purview. Just might be some little things in there that you haven't seen yet. So Copilot and data security, that's the first step that we need to go through. Obviously, Copilot is quite an exciting product in terms of bringing stuff into your organization, and it will generate responses from your organizational data. So documents, emails, calendar, chats, meetings and contacts. It will bring all that together with additional context about things like the meeting you're in or other chats you're in at the moment, and try and bring that together to provide something relevant to you. But of course, the key area where it does get stuff from is your data. And it has the capability to surface almost any document from within your Microsoft 365 environment. In particular, any what I'd call ordinary documents, any ordinary documents that you've got sitting in Microsoft 365, it's going to be able to query that and return it if it feels that that's relevant, or pick information from outside of it. But that also means that it could potentially bring back some sensitive documents, stuff that is confidential, that shouldn't be being shared generally, that should only really be being seen by a few people. So, for example, maybe someone's asking the Copilot, show me the salaries of the senior leadership team, and that just so happens that there is this spreadsheet sitting there that got all that sort of detail in that isn't really shared with anyone else, but could be then surfaced because Copilot does have access to it. And the other area that perhaps people sometimes also forget is, it could be bringing back some stuff that's out of date documents that have a shelf life, or contain information that was relevant at a time but isn't relevant now, and might actually give you some spurious results. So the key, I suppose, thing about Copilot then is it's going to surface that organizational data to which the individual user has got at the least view permissions. So if a user has got permissions to see these documents, then Copilot can return it to them. That's the key thing around Copilot. If you've got permission to see the document, Copilot could surface it for you, or surface some information from it. And so whatever questions you've asked of Copilot, if it feels it's something relevant from that document and you have the rights to see it, then it will do it. It might be a document that you don't necessarily know exists, or is deeply hidden within your Microsoft 365 structure, but Copilot could find it and return it. So what can we do about that? Because that is one of the key concerns for most organizations about adopting Copilot and bringing that to the fore in an organization. Is like, are you going to suddenly start surfacing stuff that is a little bit too sensitive? So what can we do? Well, perhaps the first thing that you should do is look at your permissions in SharePoint. In particular, if your information is up in SharePoint, then making good use of the normal SharePoint permissions that are available to you means that you can restrict certain sites or libraries or folders from being seen by anyone. You can restrict it to make sure that, no, it's this particular group can see this, and members of that group are going to be able to see the content in here. But if you're not a member of this particular group, you're not going to see anything. You're not going to be able to do that. That is good practice anyway, regardless of Copilot. That's good practice anyway, because it just makes sure that people can't stumble upon this information. if they would just happen to be wandering around. Copilot obviously makes it easier to stumble on some of this because you don't necessarily know it's there and it can retrieve it from wherever. So having those SharePoint permissions in place is a very good starting point, and it's probably one of the first things you should be looking at. The reason why it's one of the first things is you don't really need anything else you don't need to deploy anything to deal with that. The SharePoint permission model is well understood, it's well known. You've got the access to this already. There's no special licensing around that. You can start managing that now. So it's definitely the place to start. But we can go a bit further with this, because the problem with SharePoint permissions is they are stuck with a particular site or a particular library or a particular folder. They don't stick with the file. If you move that file, if someone happens to move it somewhere else into a location that is more readily accessible by others, then Copilot is going to be able to see it again and be able to surface it again. So that's where you should then start looking at other protection. And sensitivity labels from Microsoft Purview is one thing you can use to do that. Sensitivity labels are a way to tag a document, if you like, to show what its sensitivity is. So some people will know, how sensitive is this document? Is it general public? Is it just an internal document that's, yes, could be shared internally in our organization? Or is it confidential? Or is it highly confidential? Or is it super restricted? Whatever your labels are. But basically, it's giving that indication to users of this is how sensitive this stuff is, and maybe you should treat it with care. And Copilot will respect sensitivity labels. It won't respect them, though, if you haven't got protection on them. So a label without protection is essentially open to anyone. Yes, you can mark something as highly confidential, but if it hasn't got protection on it, then it's still technically open to anyone. But sensitivity labels can apply protection. And what we mean here by the protection is then the document is encrypted. And that goes wherever the file goes. So if the file is taken out of a particular SharePoint site and is put somewhere else, even into a public SharePoint site, unless you have permissions to open that document, you're not going to be able to get any content from it or not see anything from it. Copilot will respect that as well. It will say, there's an encrypting label on this. You don't have permission to that label or documents that have been applied with that label. So I can't provide anything back to you on this. So it is securing the content. So if you do have documents that are particularly sensitive, you should be looking at sensitivity labels as a way to do that. Just a quick aside then on the protection there. It is basically two areas of, or two features that it will provide. It provides access control in that, yes, the file is encrypted, and only if you're authorized will you be able to open up that document. It also can apply usage rights. So as well as then saying you're an authorized user, you can come in, but as you've been authorized, I'm only letting you do certain things. I might not let you print. I might not let you save. Importantly, I might not let you change the label to something less sensitive. These are all things that can be applied in sensitivity label encryption. And the picture on the right there will sort of show, look, we've got the author who has full rights. You can have a user group that is co-owner, which is essentially almost full rights. But we could have some reviewers who are a different user group, or particular named users, or even a domain, a partner domain or the home domain. Maybe everyone in the organization might be able to read it, but can't actually change any content there. The important usage right with respect to Copilot is essentially the view. It's being able to view it. So if you don't specify view rights to a particular set of users, so I've got any other users on the right there, they don't have access to that document. They can't get in. They haven't been specified as having any rights. And that's how Copilot would treat it. It's like, you aren't specified in this group on the left here. You're one of any other users on the right. You can't have this. And importantly, that protection goes wherever the file goes. So if it gets moved to a different area, public area of SharePoint, Copilot is still not going to be able to return it because you don't have access. One of the other ways information is shared within Microsoft 365 is through the sharing mechanism. Essentially in SharePoint, you can say, I'm going to share this document with people. And this is where data loss prevention could come in from Purview. And data loss prevention is normally around preventing sharing of sensitive information. Commonly, you do it with people externally, in terms of like, this is stuff that shouldn't be going external. We don't want to share this document outside of the organization. That tends to be the common way, but it can do internal sharing as well. So it can say, this document isn't allowed to be shared internally. It needs to be kept quite private. You know, I'm not allowing other people to see this. So you can have DLP policies that can do that. And again, Copilot will respect that in terms of like, this can't be shared with me, so I shouldn't be able to see this, and it won't return stuff. The other thing I mentioned about information coming back is the out-of-date stuff. And that's where you perhaps should be looking at data lifecycle. Data lifecycle is the retention policies, retention labels side of Purview. And it's about making sure that you're not keeping information that is outdated or stale. I know this is a big area to kind of try and implement. A lot of people do a kind of more general coverage on this, typical kind of like we're retaining things for 7 years and maybe we're deleting it after that period. But you could look at doing this in terms of stuff shouldn't be being kept for too long. You know, it is a bit of a compliance risk having content around that you shouldn't be holding on to anymore. So it is worth looking at that, because Copilot, if it can read it, it will bring it back, even if it's out of date. So starting to bring in things like some data lifecycle policies or labels to help with that automatic data deletion would be a good idea as well, because then it starts to avoid bringing back stale information. Now, there's 4 controls here that we've implemented. 3 of those are Purview. Obviously, the SharePoint is not specifically a Purview thing, but the other 3 are. You know, they are within the Purview tool set. So depending how familiar you are with Purview, it's information protection is the area that has sensitivity labels. Data loss prevention is its own thing, and data lifecycle is its own thing. But they are all features that you can use within the Purview tool set. And a lot of those features you can do with E3, an E3 license or business premium license. If you want to do some of the more automation to automatically apply things like sensitivity labels or retention labels, then you're looking at an uplift, not straight to E5, although E5 would include it. There are various add-ons in between that can get you there. But what I'm showing you on screen now, if you take the automation part out, is all available at an E3 level or business premium level. And really, you do as much of this as you can. I would say at a minimum, do the SharePoint permissions. That's the thing, really is the area to sort of start, but then start looking at sensitivity labels, because they are the first line of defense in terms of making sure files are being controlled wherever they sit. Then you can look at bringing in data loss prevention to help prevent that. And then if you really want to go further and optimize this, then look at bringing in data lifecycle as well. All 4 of those together will really help with controlling the data that's being brought back by Copilot. So there are other insights that we can bring out from Purview as well, and other controls that are available in Purview to help with dealing with things like Purview and other generative AI sites and services that are out there. The first one that's fairly new is the AI Hub. And the AI Hub has been brought into Purview to help you understand what sort of usage is going on. It can help you discover what people are doing in terms of what sensitive data are they using, how many users are using AI. We can see that because the discovery tools in there will help us to see, and the various monitoring that's going on will pull that together so we can see what exactly who's using it and how much data they are capturing that may be deemed as being sensitive. We can also look at starting to protect some of those interactions, so prevent unauthorized access to this sensitive data. Again, looking at things like sensitivity labels to bring in, but also being able to recognize when that interactions are happening. We can also start looking at bringing in some of the controls around stopping users from uploading sensitive data or pasting sensitive information into the prompts for some of these services. And then there are a few tools in there to help around compliance in terms of detecting and mitigating some of those risks and other violations that we might have to be wary of depending on what our organisation does. The AI Hub provides an overview. Start with, it's, as I say, it's available within Purview, and it will give you various analytics in terms of what is going on. It will show you here, for example, we've got the particular sensitive types that are being shared with AI assistants based on the sensitive types that are already available within Purview. Again, if you had your own custom ones, some of those could be being shown here as well. This is the overview page, so if you hit the view details buttons, you go into the relevant area of Purview around things like Content Explorer to then be able to show more about, right, this stuff is going in those places. Quite interesting there is the interactions per app. So yes, Copilot will probably be big if you're doing Copilot within your organization, but with the right connections in place, you'll also be picking up information from other services such as Bard, such as ChatGPT, to then see, well, what stuff is going on outside of Copilot in these other services that potentially people have got access to in your organization. There are a few things around what's called here the unethical use of AI interactions, and again, that's tying in with some of the other detections that Copilot can, that Purview can do in terms of, are you using various languages? It looks like it's, is there a threat going on? Perhaps you are disclosing some information that we've already said that should be super sensitive, and we need to be watching out for that. Money laundering, stock manipulation is based on a few of the other financial types that are available within Purview, and it's sort of speculated on that. So there's a little bit of tuning you can do around that to get some more meaningful data out of that. But it's looking at it all the time to give you an idea of there might be some risks here. On the right there is the insider risk. Now that's coming from insider risk management in Purview. So again, which users are using AI tools that have actually got some form of elevated risk at the moment, because IRM's detected that they're a risky user in some sort, and it will just show you the number of interactions that are going on there. The other things you'll get from the hub as well is some more detail in terms of the Activity Explorer here, giving you some information around, well, when is something in Copilot being seen as being particularly sensitive? It's got a sensitive type. I can see what type of information it's got. The Activity Explorer will show that. Plus, it will give you details of AI interactions once you've got it there. It will tell you, look, it's you're going through doing something with Copilot in Bing Chat or Word or Outlook, etc., and let you know if any files are being referenced, or even if any sensitive files are being referenced. So then you can spot and see, right, so what files got pulled back by Copilot. So it's useful information there to see what kind of information is pulling back from those sources. You do also get an element of information around the prompts that are shown here as well, in terms of what did the user ask, or what was their prompt when they put in there, certainly within Copilot, to then bring that information back to say, okay, they asked this and it brought this stuff back. Could be a good way to help spot, do we have some information here that we should have made more protected? Should it be inside a restricted SharePoint site? Should it have an appropriate sensitivity label on it? The AI Hub also has a range of policies available for you to use that can help. And these are kind of one-click policies, if you like. You can say, look, I need to turn this on, and it will automatically go and put the policy in place within Purview in the relevant feature. So there is a couple of policies for doing some data discovery. One of them is a DLP policy, data loss prevention, called Microsoft AI Hub Discover Sensitive Prompts in AI Assistants. And that's using endpoint DLP to spot what sensitive content is being pasted or uploaded into your browsers and to other AI systems. So it's not just Copilot here, it's the other things as well. It puts it in this policy by default in audit mode, cover all users and groups. You can go and then update those policies afterwards to customize it slightly to bring in the other information that you're particularly interested in, or to cover certain groups of users if you don't have licenses for everybody. The other policy is the insider risk management policy around doing some browsing in systems. So again, this is a one-click policy, and it will create it for you to then start spotting, well, look, users are going to these assistants, and then based on them doing that and other activities that they do, insider risk management may decide that actually some of this behavior that you're showing around this event, around going to and browsing these AI assistants, actually looks a bit suspicious. Maybe we're spotting that, yes, you're making these kind of prompts, but then you're downloading a lot of sensitive information as a result of that. So it's bringing in a couple of policies here that will then give extra insights within the AI Hub. So if you deploy these policies, then it lights up some more stuff inside the various dashboard within the AI Hub to show you more about what's going on, pull it all together so you can see what's happening. There are also a couple of policies, things around data security that it can help as well. So again, there is a policy that will in DLP that it can be enabled that will bring in the adaptive protection. I'm going to speak about this a little bit later on, but the adaptive protection in DLP feeds from information from insider risk management, and the default policy puts in a warning, but with an override if you are doing sensitive uploads or pasting sensitive information into these other assistants. So it does go in as test mode. It doesn't start pushing things straight away. Again, you can go and look at that to say, let's go and customize it if we need to, or even enable it fully later on if you think that's doing the right thing. The other area I would say, as we've already spoken about, is information protection and looking at sensitivity labels. If you don't have any sensitivity labels already, then AI Hub can create a default set for you. I'm not necessarily going to recommend that because the default set may not be fit for purpose for you. And if you have got stuff already, it actually will skip that. It won't do it because you've already got labels configured. So don't worry if you have already got labels out. This isn't going to override that. But if you don't have labels, you could enable this and it will bring some stuff out for you. But there are other areas of Purview that also give you some AI insights. The Compliance Manager has now got 4 additional premium AI templates available. So there, whatever regulations around AI that these various templates provide, or actions that they recommend, you can also start tracking those within your Compliance Manager if you use that. So they are available now, and they will therefore be updated going along as things happen. And I'm sure more templates will appear as usage spreads. Other areas within Purview, communications compliance is the tool that allows you to look at user messaging and to make sure that you're respecting organizational policy on that and not using bad language or not sharing confidential information. Well, that has been extended now to include Copilot for Microsoft 365. So any interactions that are going on there, it can be monitoring those, and it can then flag that if there is some sensitive information being shared there, if you're looking for a particular type of information, so any kind of disclosure that you don't want to happen, then you can spot that those interactions are happening, because essentially Copilot interactions are being saved in a mailbox. They're in the user's mailbox, so it is messaging. So communications compliance can do that. The option has now appeared to be able to do that. Your interactions are in the Purview audit log as well, the unified audit log. So you can see those details. You can do a big search on audit to bring out that kind of stuff. There is an activity, say, called interacted with Copilot, and it allows you to bring out the information in from the audit log if you are using that as a means to investigate or look at details of what people are doing. You also have, obviously, because it's being stored in the mailbox, you can do it with e-discovery and content search. You can go and search for a particular user's prompts and to see what they're doing. if that's an investigation going on, or if you need to do any kind of subject access request type activities, then maybe you need to be looking at that as well. So eDiscovery will be able to bring this stuff back, and content search obviously is part of eDiscovery, or it's a tool on its own that you can use with Purview, and that will enable you to bring stuff back. As long as you put the right information into the query, it will do that for you. Retention policies can also retain these interactions. So there was an option before as a location within a retention policy to say I need to retain or delete stuff from Teams chats. Well, that now includes Copilot interactions as well. So if you're not doing anything around Teams chats, it will just apply to Copilot interactions, or it will apply to both. But it does mean that you can retain those interactions if that is something that you need to do. If there is a regulation that means you should be holding on to these, you can retain those to make sure you have a record of them, and potentially delete them, as part of the policy to say later on, actually after a certain period of time, we need to delete those interactions. So you can do that. And also within retention labels, which are the item-based things within data lifecycle. So policies are more site-based, large scale. Labels are for individual files, and there are auto-apply label policies that you can set up if you have the license uplift to automatically apply retention labels based on content and things. Well, you can target those at those attachments that have been referenced by Copilot. So that's been added in as well to be able to say, no, this is something that came back from Copilot. I need to apply a retention label on it because we need to hold on to that. So lots of places within Purview now that we can interact with Copilot in particular and bring that information either under control or check that we are meeting our compliance obligations. So I've got a little bit of time left to talk about some of the new features that are in Purview. So not necessarily Copilot stuff, but just a little bit of extra. Perhaps the most obvious thing that's been happening recently is the new portal. It used to be sitting under compliance.microsoft.com, and it has now brought together the compliance areas, these risk and compliance areas of Purview, which were really in the kind of the old compliance.microsoft.com portal, and brought together the stuff also from what was in the Azure portal, which was the Microsoft Purview data governance side of things. So if you're using things like data map and the data catalog for searching other cloud sources of information, then it's coming to a unified portal now. And it is purview.microsoft.com. It looks quite new. It's got a slightly different navigation to it. You have to go into the site and then you pick a solution to then essentially say, this is the feature I'm dealing with, be it information risk, information protection, insider risk, data loss prevention, the AI hub. You would go that way. So rather than down the left, this is the most obvious change. Down the left of the old portal, you could sort of see all the solutions in one that you sort of had. You have to hit solutions first. It's an extra click, which is a bit, I suppose, against what navigation optimization should be, but they're trying to clean it up, and they're trying to, I don't doubt that it will change, but it is the direction that we're going. The old portal is going to be going at some point this year. I should imagine by the end of the year it will be gone and that the new portal is there. So I would encourage you to start using the new portal as soon as possible to get familiar with it. I know I am, and I'm trying hard, and old habits die hard, but it's definitely the way to go to make sure that you are getting familiar with how it works. And also any new developments in terms of how some of these things work will only really appear in the new portal now anyway. For example, eDiscovery is going through a little bit of a public preview at the minute as well, in terms of a new look to how you bring your cases together, whether they are standard cases or premium cases. There's a little bit of UI tweaking going on there at the moment, so it is worth seeing it within the new portal. You can switch though at the moment, so you can try one and switch back to the other if you prefer. There's a little toggle at the top there you can see in the little window. The other thing that has been released recently, but I I've obviously talked about it, is the AI Hub. Here is the front page of that within the new portal. So it is available there now, and it is something that you should go and have a look at in terms of what it can show you about current usage within your organization, especially if you are starting to bring Copilot out and do stuff. Then I do encourage you to go and have a look at it, because it's offering some insights there that you could go and start doing. There are a few things you need to do to really get a lot of the insights there. One of which is start the audit, which most people have got on anyway, to be honest. Why wouldn't you? But there is the Purview browser extension that you should also be looking to deploy, because that will pull more information back from things like Edge and Chrome, etc. Actually, you don't necessarily need it for Edge, but you would for Chrome, Firefox, to get that information and that extra insight about those other AI services and what users are pasting into your browsers. You should also be looking then to onboard devices into Purview. Now, if you do Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, that is the same process for Purview. And it also then brings in options to do things around endpoint DLP, if you're looking at that, and do more controls in terms of what people are doing about putting stuff up into cloud services or adding information into prompts. But you can just onboard the devices anyway to get a bit of insight. And then the last sort of point around, and this is the getting started bits at the top here, I'm listing basically, the extend your insights is turning on some of the additional, those policies, those default policies, in particular for discovery, because then it will bring some of that information together around, okay, so this is what's happening. Some of those features, though, would require an uplift because they'll be based on things like endpoint DLP, which is an E5 feature or an add-on feature. Speaking of an uplift, the last new thing that's sort of come along, and a few of you I'm sure have probably seen this already, is adaptive protection. And that's the link between insider risk management and the risk that can be assigned to a user, and then using that level somewhere else, in particular in data loss prevention. That's where it first came in, which means you can have dynamic restrictions coming from those insider risk management detections. Previously, insider risk management was really only a tool that allowed you to kind of triage things to see, okay, there's the potential problem here, I need to have a look, but it didn't actually take any action. With adaptive protection, now it kind of can. Now it will be a case of, okay, insider risk management has assigned this elevated risk level to a user. I could have a DLP policy that says, if my user has got an elevated risk and the insider risk, then I should be blocking something. I should be blocking you from sharing content externally or with certain information, or maybe I should be not allowing you to print sensitive documents that have confidential labels on, for example, whatever other controls you want to do. And then depending on those risks, you might have other DLP policies that maybe start to loosen the restrictions a little bit, because like, okay, you're at moderate risk now. Okay, I'm still blocking, but you can override that, which means I can still check that's happening. Okay, you're down at minor risk. I'll show you some warnings, but I'm not actually stopping you doing things. The level of controls and what you put in is entirely up to you in terms of the policies, but it's linking IRM and what that detection can give us into DLP to then enforce things, to start putting some restrictions on. So that's not necessarily new, that's been around a little while. But what has become more new is that it's starting to be integrated with other areas. One of the key areas is conditional access. So it's bringing the insider risk level condition into CA policies in the same way that there is a sign-in risk and a user risk level. So you also now have the insider risk. And that means you can start, based on what insider risk management is telling you about a user and assigning them an escalated risk level, we could say, okay, for certain cloud apps, I'm going to block you because you're an elevated risk at the moment. So I don't think you should have access to some of our sensitive cloud apps, as I'm going to block it. Or I might be asking you to satisfy a stronger MFA method. I might, just a text MFA might not be enough. I need it to be authenticator, or I need you to be using a FIDO2 key. So what other, again, any other controls that you kind of want to put in place based on the insider risk level and what that value is for any particular user. And that's happening when they're signing into things. So at that point of sign in, it may well say, no, you're minor risk, fine, no restrictions. Oh no, you're an elevated risk, you're escalated. You're more risky, I'm going to be restricting you. And that's quite exciting in a way, because that's taking stuff from Purview and it's actually putting it over into the Entra world. So it's one of the sort of first points where we've really started getting some things coming in from Purview and then taking it out into the security world, other than the normal data security stuff that Purview is dealing with. This is now starting to look at, well, this is identity security now. I can restrict access to things. The other area where adaptive protection has recently extended as well, and the preview at the moment, is into data lifecycle management, so retention. So basically what you can enable is that if a user is deemed to be an escalated risk, it's going to automatically start applying retention labels onto their content, onto their unlabeled content, which means that it's being retained for 120 days. And that protects it from deletion. Yes, the user might look like it's been deleted to them, but actually it's being retained behind the scenes so that it can be retrieved later. So it just means that if the user is at this elevated risk, we're not going to be letting them delete stuff en masse. It's basically not going to be able to happen. It might seem like it's happened, but we can retrieve the data and we're protected for 120 days. At the end of 120 days, that stops, so then they could permanently delete stuff. But you would hopefully have already realized that there's something up with that user by then. And depending on what your insider risk management policies are doing, you could well already be alerted to that user and be investigating them. So what are our next steps? In terms of Copilot, outside of Purview, your general readiness, we do have an engagement, our Copilot for Microsoft 365 baseline readiness engagement. And that helps look at some of the data access challenges and reviews your technical readiness for going ahead. So I encourage you to have a look at that, because that will help get you prepared for deploying Copilot more widely. From a Purview perspective, we do have our Success Pathway offering, which is about looking at your compliance posture, assessing where you're at, and looking to improve that, generating a roadmap for you about Purview technologies and what things you could be implementing if you haven't already. Great if you haven't started at all with Purview, or if you're looking to build on some of the foundations of what might already be in place and start to bring in some of those advanced features. The Success Pathway is a way that we can iteratively improve what you're doing with Purview. There is also a funded engagement from Microsoft that you may qualify for, which is the Data Security Workshop. This uses elements of Purview to discover what sensitive information could be inside your environment, and therefore what risks that might pose to you. Also what stale data is in there and what insider risk is going on. It is a fairly prescribed engagement. It's not overly flexible, but it is a good start point if you wanted to start seeing about what the risks are within my organization of the data that I hold and how it's being used and what users are up to. So that is an engagement that could be funded by Microsoft. You do have to apply for that one though, so if you're interested, reach out and we'll see if that's something that could be applied to you. So thank you very much for that. At this point, it's any questions, which means I need to have a little look at what is in the chat and see if anyone's been asking anything that hasn't been answered already by Sarah at the other side. I'm just waiting for things to come up. It's not coming up for me at the moment, but I'm just waiting to see. I've got a little spinning wheel at the moment. Here we go. So yes, we are providing the recording later. It will be made available throughout at some point later this week. So don't worry, the slides too. So Adrian has asked, is everything you're showing included in Microsoft 365 E3 license, or is an add-on required? So I've mentioned it as we've been going along in terms of some of the things are available, and in particular those controls that you can do around your Copilot readiness. If you don't do any of the kind of the automation side of things, and what I mean there is automatically detecting sensitive content and then applying a sensitivity label, for example, based on that, or a retention label based on that, then yes, E3 is fine. You know, you can do all of that within E3, and SharePoint permissions are not a Purview feature anyway. As such, they are there already. So yeah, definitely an E3 thing. But some of the stuff around that might require the E5 compliance add-on, or one of the more individual add-ons, or even E5 itself, things like adaptive protection that we've just been talking about, that requires insider risk management, which is an E5 feature. So yes, you definitely need it there. A few of the tools within AI Hub will rely on an add-on feature. You know, some of the stuff we will be able to get straight away. We'll get some of those insights. But when you're looking at things happening inside browsers, then really you're piggybacking on endpoint DLP, potentially. So there is potential that you do need a kind of add-on going on there as well. And definitely if you're turning on the adaptive protection stuff from insider risk, then yes, again, that's part of one of the default policies there in the AI Hub was to use adaptive protection. Well, that's going to need insider risk management, which needs an uplift. So some of the things you can do without. I mean, to be honest with you, the AI Hub will be there in Purview now for you. You know, it will be kind of enabled. It's just how much more you can enable as you go along. So you will get some information. You will be able to put things into the, you know, things will go into the Activity Explorer. You will be able to onboard devices without an add-on, but you may not then be able to enforce any of the controls until you do get an add-on. Can the AI Hub be configured to provide either alerts or reports? The alerts potentially can come from the policies that come out of it. So it's not something that's done directly within the AI Hub, but those policies we were talking about in a DLP policy or insider risk management policy, they have got the ability to raise alerts within. So that's where you would be doing it. It's, you know, it's not directly from the AI Hub, it's from those policies that you've implemented as part of that, whether they are a default policy or whether they are something else. Communications compliance policies, if you're doing that and bringing, and that can appear in the AI Hub when you set those up, if you're picking Copilot as an interaction. Again, you can do alerts on those, so you can bring them in if you need to. I don't think the AI Hub at the moment has any specific reports of its own. You know, it's a lot of those things off the dashboard will say, I need more details or view details, and you'll go off to something like Content Explorer or Activity Explorer, which you can then export a lot of information from if you need to. So it doesn't have direct reports of its own, but as it's developed, and it is in preview at the moment, so it's not necessarily the finished product, and as you know, Microsoft will develop things further, then maybe reports will come out, you know, and as more users use it and give feedback, then I'm sure they will start looking at bringing some more reports into the actual AI Hub itself to give you information. Otherwise, it's the overview that you get on the main dashboard to start with when you first go in, which gives you some information and could be a good quick snapshot for very high level reports, but then it's going to take you further into Purview to get the actual meat of the detail out. So that's it. Thank you. I've just run ever so slightly over, but I've managed to answer your questions. Thank you very much for attending. It's been great to go through this. I hope it's been useful. Don't forget, yes, the recording and the slides are going to be made available later on. If you have any issues or any other questions you want to ask, then please reach out to us here at Coach Show, and we will be glad to help. So thank you very much.